need to double that with the same. Well,
yeah.
I can work miracles, but I don't walk on water. So that clarity is.
Hello and welcome to episode 144 of Rockstar CMO FM. The M is for marketing and the F is for well you decide. As you're probably wondering, does the world need another effing marketing podcast? I'm your host, Ian Truscott. I'm a B2B CMO and trusted advisor. I'm no rockstar, but a leadership coach told me I should be. On this weekly podcast, I chat to the true rockstars, my fabulous guests and chums, to share some marketing street knowledge to inspire your inner rockstar. Come say hello. You can find all our contact details and the show notes at rockstarcmo.com. It's Saturday the 10th of December 2022. Thank you for joining us. I hope you've had a good week and you're well and staying as sane as you feel you need to be. In this week's episode, Jeff Clark and I discuss doing more with less tech. Grant Johnson, CMO at Embers, returns for a chat with his 12 CMO pitfalls. And we wind down the week in the Rockstar CMO virtual bar with Robert Rose for a cocktail and a marketing thought. But first, we need to pay the bar tab. I'll be back in a moment.
We'll be right back after this word.
We'll be right back.
After this word.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Christy Heiler hosts a fantastic podcast called Own It. Christy, tell us more about the show.
Own It is all about celebrating women and non-binary advertising agency owners. We talk about buying out of the boys' club of advertising because less than 1% of ad agencies are owned by women.
And where can people subscribe?
You can find the podcast at untilyouownit.com. We're also on the Marketing Podcast Network at marketingpodcast.net. And of course, you can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard her. Go subscribe.
On to our first segment, the Marketing Studio with Jeff Clark, our resident rockstar and CMO advisor. And we've been watching a Forrester webinar.
Hey, Ian. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Thank you very much, Jeff.
Come on into the studio. Sit yourself down and let's have a chat.
I need to edit in a door opening sound effect there or something. Well, thank you very much, Jeff, for welcoming to the Rockstar CMO studio with Jeff Clark. Fantastic. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing very well.
Jolly good.
It's getting close to the beginning of winter, so we're out buying our winter gear.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely winter here. And it's funny because, as you know, the other regular on the show, Robert Rose, lives in California, and he's like, he keeps referring to this as fall. And I'm like, it isn't fucking fall. This is... it's going to be
It's a little warmer out there on average. Yes.
But it's bloody frigid here. So we've got those bright blue, very cold days, if anybody's interested in the weather in the UK at the moment. And
awesome.
Deep frost, -Celsius temperatures, so very cold. Anyway, this week, something that actually both of us picked up on, it is prediction season, as usual, and so we can't avoid that, can we, even here on Rockstar CMO? So that we're dipping into the predictions. And one of the things I think we both had a look at was Forrester LinkedIn Live event, your old crew. They made some predictions for 2023 B2B marketing, which, unlike Forrester, is actually freely available to watch. So I can include a link to it.
Oh my gosh. OMG, as they say these days.
I can include a link to that in the show notes. You don't need a subscription. You can just watch it like a regular person like I did. And enjoy it. And it featured our old chum Simon Daniels, so maybe he's having a big influence with Forrester over there. And Meta, and I knew I'd get this wrong, Karagiani, is that correct?
Yes.
Because you know that crew. Dave Parry and Conrad Mills. And they discussed sort of 4 predictions. And then I think what we caught off from that was there was like a common thread of protecting your customer base, working more closely with sales, which is the age-old. I think you can make that prediction every single bloody year, can't you, that we have to do that. Whether we should continue to host virtual or hybrid events and what we should do post-pandemic. But the one I think that caught our attention was spending less on technology. Well, certainly something that I know you know a bit about. So I'll send the listeners they can listen to the Forrester predictions. We won't reenact that here. Although if we were to do it, I would play Simon, I think, because he's English, right? And you can play the other three.
Yep.
We won't rehash that here. But I know from your Serious Decisions and Forrester days, it's something you used to do a lot, haven't you? You've got experience of auditing tech stacks and realizing those cost savings that they talked about in their predictions. So finally, we get to this point. What say you, Jeff? You thought I was never going to end there, didn't you?
Yeah. When's it my turn to talk? No. So yeah, I think the thing is that there is kind of a common thread, beyond the 4 points, which is, how to drive more value, which is, so it's, you're protecting your customer base, you're building relations, better relations with sales, you're trying to get more and more out of events as you're engaging customers, and then the technology. I mean, I think one of the things that's reacting to is the fact that, tech spend really grew. I mean, if you talk about from 2010 through 2020, there was just this, sort of a tripled increase in the percent of budget. So that when you think about budgets as a percent of revenue for most companies for marketing was actually going up during that time frame. Right. Then on a real basis, it's actually that tech spend was marching up quite a bit. Mm-hmm. And so, we used to benchmark spend across the people, programs, outsourced services, and technology, tech spending, and that's a big bucket. That includes, all of your overhead, et cetera. And so, tech spending, went from 2 to 3%, to 6 to 8% of the total budget. And so there it's, starting to crowd out the spend on programs and staff in particular.
Can I just pause you on that a moment? Because when you're talking about the average, is that the average revenue of the company? Because isn't it, I mean, the studies I've seen, it's 30% or so is being spent on MarTech out of the marketing budget.
So there's where you got to ask, any firm that's quoting these things, you got to say, well, what are you including in the budget? Because if you're if you said, the CMO gets so much of a program budget, and so out of that, we're going to spend some on technology. Yeah. But if you look at the entire budget, of which typically, people and programs are, 40 plus percent of that total budget. And then you could look at outsourced services, which could be outsourcing to a business development firm. It could be your PR firm, whatever, because you're outsourcing capabilities that you could actually have in-house, and then tech. So those two would typically be in the kind of the 5 to 6% of the total budget. So again, it depends on what where you're starting. The important thing, I think, was the trend line, because no matter how you do the number crunching, as long as you're consistent with how you're measuring it, then you're going to see that tripling of spend. And in 2020, we did see it starting to level off, but say probably 2019, 2020, and into the next year. And I don't know if what in terms, because now you're hitting the pandemic time frame. So, I don't know how much that might have, put a damper on things, but certainly is because, I was involved doing it was helping customers advisory basis doing tech auditing, but we also did a lot of consulting gigs where we'd go into a large company and do the inventory, build out how we're going to do the analysis. And it was pretty consistent that people had overspent. And particularly if you get into a company that's maybe formed by a lot of acquisition, then you get the duplicate marketing automation systems, duplicate CRM systems, you get duplicate, web platform. And so a lot of that has to be rationalized. But I think the thing is that when we're coming into a season like the next couple of years, where, everybody's been talking about recession for 12 months. So when you talk about it for 12 months, it's going to happen whether it should happen or not.
Absolutely. And when the confidence in the C-suite is down, where do they look for budget cuts? It's going to be in marketing, isn't it? So
it's going to be in marketing.
That's an age-old trope, isn't it? But
Yeah, and if you think you're not, actually, you think back to some of those other trends, we're going to focus on the existing customer base. We're going to try to drive more value out of events. We may need to put more emphasis on opportunity generation. So now it's kind of like hunker down, focus on getting, some basic things right. And maybe that does mean, either pulling money out of the budget, or it just means better focus for your MarTech spend.
And also, when you were talking just now about where it is that you can see this wastage, if you like, of marketing investment in technology, it's not just having duplicate systems and processes like multiple CRMs or CMSs or digital asset management, but it's also the fact that organizations tend to overbuy, don't they? So they've got they've got a product that does, personalization and multi-language and multilingual, and they don't use any of those functions or whatever that happens to be. Yeah.
And there might have been a good idea to invest in something, and you've got you're either paying off a license agreement or you still got a subscription that automatically renews. Yeah. And yet the team that did that is not around anymore. Whatever the reason is. Yeah. And that's where, as much as we talk about, auditing in terms of the context of doing more with less, it's like, this is actually it's a good annual exercise. You're going to put a budget together. Okay, let's go out and, inventory everything, understand what the budget is, because the budget for these tools, every company does budgeting differently, and they may be the actual, who authorized and who's spending it may be in different, cost centers. It might, different budget owners within marketing. Some of it might be in sales. And so, doing this inventory and really doing it across sales and marketing, since there's a lot of overlap, is good annual practice.
You seem to have dived straight into what we do, right?
So I was foreshadowing.
But you have these 6 steps, don't you, of what we need to do, including what you were just talking about that conducting that inventory of what it is that we have and what it all does. And by the way, I just realized how we're coming up to the holidays, and it's the time of gift giving, and we're going to talk to people about reducing budget, getting rid of things, reductions. And
this is called the Scrooge exercise.
And on this very show, I have Grant coming up, our former boss, who's going to talk about the 12 pitfalls of being a CMO. So it's quite a low key, not the holiday spirit.
This is we got 3 weeks to recover, so don't.
So anyway, don't worry. The Grinch that's stealing our marketing technology. So that was one of your steps, is conducting inventory. But there was something before that.
So first, I think you need to define, what. So if you're going to audit your technology, you could define the scope. And again, this is, if we're talking about budget and somebody says you need to take 30% out or whatever off the, then it's like, okay, we're going to look at everything, so it's as broad as possible. We're going to include the whole stack. What are all the license and subscription fees, related expensive, administrative time, because sometimes it's people time that's focused on things, not just the things themselves. Yeah. But we, in our scope, and this could, if you're not trying to look at the whole budget, this is really important, is to say, what are the organization's goals? What should we be guided upon to say something is a good thing, or it's a bad thing? Are we trying to ramp up revenue? Are we trying to, focus more on existing accounts? Are we trying to become more efficient? Are we trying to improve engagement? Right. Because all of these things become, it's like doing any roadmap or any analysis. It's like, what are the goals? Yeah. And the goals aren't just the fact that we've got to have technology. Yeah. And this technology is supposed to make us be more efficient. But in order to do what?
Yeah, the outcomes.
Yes. And what are the outcomes?
And this is almost, it's very similar. I've been in a lot of on many sides of acquiring marketing technology, and this is almost like that process, isn't it? Is like, just what are your requirements? What is it you need? What's the scope? What are you going to look at and stuff like that? And then you started talking about this just a moment ago when we were talking about the marketing technology that we have, then conducting that inventory. What are the key things about conducting the inventory of the tech that you have?
Well, if you're starting from scratch, a great place to go is finance, because finance will have a list of everything we've spent money on, and those could be the clues to where what it is, what budget it's sitting in, who the budget owner is. But you should also make the tool discovery part of your audit process. So if you're and I don't want to jump too far ahead into the audit process, but it's like you want to be talking to people. Hopefully talking to people as opposed to just doing some sort of web-based survey. Although you can mix these things to get to what you want, but you want to be asking the question, what tools do you use when you are, if you're running PR, what tools do you use to run your PR program? And sometimes, as we found doing audits for companies, it's like, ooh, we didn't know that was there. Put that on the list. And you may find things that are like freebie stuff or whatever that people use that it's important to know about.
Especially in large organizations where you've got different field offices, there'll be somebody that signed up for something for $100 on their credit card, and it's become mission critical for them. And sometimes it's the time of looking after that actually is the cost of the marketing team and the integration of that data, rather than the actual product itself, isn't it? So that's what you were saying about being part of the scope of the audit, right? So so we've moved. So we've scoped out our audit. We're conducting this inventory. So that's our first two steps. What's the third step?
So define your audit process. So again, listing your goals is going to be important because that's your North Star for how you're evaluating the technology. Build a list of questions. So like good surveying, no more than 10 questions. I mean, if you're what I found is like if you booked 45 minutes to an hour with somebody and maybe a small team and you're going to go through your list of questions, I mean, you can't get past 10 questions. No. So, and you want to have a lot of open-end questions about, what's preventing you from doing your work more efficiently? What's helping you achieve the goals? What is, what technology even though you may be trying to, reduce spend, you may want to ask the question, what technology do you need to do your job better? Because this is all when you're in interviewing people. It's not just we're here to not here to be Scrooge or the Grinch and take stuff away. We're here to figure out how to do your job better, and we've got these corporate goals we're all supposed to be aligned by. And so, what's going to help you do that better? And maybe that's not something we can put in the budget for next year, but maybe that's something we need to put on a roadmap for the future.
But also, I'm not sure about the question is what technology you need. Because otherwise people will say, I need this shiny thing that I know the name of, right? It's how can technology help? I don't know how to phrase that question.
Yes.
You'd be much better at it than me. But also to get to the bottom of what actually is their need, right? Rather than that they want the shiny, right? What technology? Well, I need Adobe. Well, do you? What Adobe you need is a way of publishing web pages or whatever the thing is. And so you have these 10 interview questions and you talk to people and it's online surveys you mentioned too in interviews, right? So we do that.
I think talking to people, which when as you mentioned, global companies, and you got a batch of people in Asia and you got a batch of people in Europe and US and Latin America. That does become difficult, but it becomes an essential part of doing the job. And it's actually, it's what helps you build the relationships. If you're going to start making decisions about these tools, you need to be building that relationship with them. And that's why the interview process is really helpful. In addition to holding a survey or something to maybe get some data out of the way, then focus on the more loosey goosey things.
Yeah. And I've done some of that in-person stuff back when I was at Tozu years ago, when I was out there in the US, and we were working with a finance organization. It was funny getting some of the marketing team together from different parts of the business to talk about tools. And then they have these conversations with each other. Oh, you use this. Oh, you've got that. Yeah. How did you get access to that? And you can, and that's
maybe you want to avoid that.
That's quite interesting. All right. So those are the first three steps. So what's the fourth step?
Well, so that now you're assimilating the information and you need to assess each tool or each technology you're using, and there's really kind of at least I found there's a couple of ways of doing this that you can use both. And one is create a chart with a couple of axes, and one axis is cost and effort, and the other is the utilization / the benefit. So you can score these different ways. You can try to just get into high, medium, low. What seems to be giving us high benefit, but we have low utilization, or what has, low benefit and yet it's costing us a lot. And so, we could get into the details, but there's lots of ways of trying to quantify this. And I found, at least personal experience, is that being more, rounding things out into more of a high, medium, low is probably as good as you need, as opposed to trying to do some sort of mathematical equation. But basically, by doing this, you're looking for, not only you're looking for redundant tools, you're looking for things that have no or low utilization. And you're looking for things that are expensive. And what's driving value versus what's not driving value. So the obvious, as I kind of mentioned, is like things driving value that have, whether they're expensive or not, certainly are in the upper right corner, if you will, and things that have low utilization and no value are in the near zero on the axes.
Well, and in this process, also a bit creeps in of the products the users like. And I've always been, most of my career, I've been on the other side of this, so representing the vendor. So when I view your process from the vendor's eyes, I think how important customer marketing is, right? Is to look at your utilization of your products within an organization and make sure that you're focused on that. Because the day of reckoning will come like this, right? And
if
also,
there's any way you can, there's any way you can measure utilization from your
SaaS,
your desktop, that's the best.
And also, I've seen so many times. Well, I mean, years and years ago when I sold CMSs, I represented a vendor, and I'd actually moved vendors, and the client, with the potential client of my new vendor, was saying, this product can't do that. Now, I'd just come from that vendor. I knew full well they could, but their user training,
perception.
The perception was all bad. And if you lose your users as a vendor, then you're in a death spiral. At some point, you will be replaced. Anyway, there's a little bit of a rant.
If you lose your users, you're going to be just using your losers.
But the thing is, I think and we're going to go over time, but with this conversation, but I think that we too often, when we're thinking about marketing, we're marketing to the senior level folks, or those are the people that come into our customer events and stuff like that. But the actual people that use the product, if you piss them off, that eventually, they'll be that will percolate upwards, and your product is going to get chucked out or marginalized as they stick their credit card in and go for something else. But anyway, so that was that.
The other. Well, but the other thing which I think is really important as you're assessing each tool is to do a process view, because, so there's always the debate about process versus technology and skills and stuff like that. But the thing is that, technology imposes or enables process. And so if, again, you go back to your goals and you say, okay, our goal is we do a lousy job on managing, opportunities from engagement to the win. So map that out, and what are the integrations and handoffs, whether they're personal, human handoffs, or whether they're automated, and look where the breakpoints are, and look where the where things get what's the term, blocked in the process flow, and certainly I've did that for a client, and it's like, oh my God, there's like a half a dozen places where you're not able to go from when somebody's engaging to your website into how you're handling it within marketing, and you're not able to, do all of the, you're not able to move all of the engagement into your CRM system, or, and it just, and when you look at the process view, that's the picture paints 1,000 words. All of a sudden people go, oh, I didn't realize we couldn't do that. And that's opportunity management's one way of looking at it, customer engagement, e-commerce conversions, life cycle management. It's like, those are all processes that you can diagram out and show how the technology works. Or doesn't.
And that's also going to test some of the integrations, isn't it, between the tools? It might not be that you need a new tool, you just need a better integration between the ones that you have.
Absolutely.
All right, so we're going to move on to the fifth step. What's the next one?
Prioritizing the actions. So obviously you've created gaps. You've created redundancies. I mean, you've visually shown where you've got maybe two technologies that are trying to do the same thing, even though, and sometimes the technologies may not look redundant, but they have similar function or overlapping functionality. So now you figure, what do I obsolete, can get away, or get rid of to save money? What do I do to train people, to improve utilization? Where do I integrate to make processes work better? And, where can I improve and streamline the processes, perhaps to correct for the poor value and utilization of the technology? And that, and if once you've done that's where the high, medium, low in terms of cost and benefit comes into play, because if I can now prioritize my list. I have things that have a high value that are low cost. I have things high value with medium cost, all the way down to things that are just we're spending money on that aren't driving value.
Yeah, and the other thing at this stage, isn't it, is although it's less prevalent now with SaaS software, it's more when you have on-premise software, is look at whether you're actually using the latest version from your vendor, right?
Yeah.
And if that will then bring any of these benefits that you have by going through an upgrade process or something like that.
Yeah.
So that's cool. So we're on to our sixth step. What's our sixth step?
Well, sixth step in most processes is measure.
Well, I want to correct you on this, because most of our times we have 5 steps, right? So
that's true. That's true.
What happened to our effing things this week?
Anytime you're starting with a goal,
yes.
The last thing you want to do is measure to say that you've actually, you've done what you intend to accomplish. And obviously that's going to happen later in the year. That's not happening in the midst of doing this process. But again, if it's reducing budget or if it's driving a better outcome, and I've worked with so many customers where we could either talk about reducing budget, we could talk about how customers had actually improved their processes and their outcomes. Sometimes at the same time, they reduce budget and produce better outcomes. And so, in order to get the confidence and the respect for being able to do this again the following year. In other words, keep your job. The measuring part is, it's not only important for that, but it's important to be a good steward for the organization.
Yeah, and I remember when you were at Serious Decisions, you actually published a case study which where somebody had made a significant saving by going.
Yeah, it was like a 40-50% savings on the budget. Yeah. And then it was all around driving revenue and driving interactions into their CRM system, and again by integrating things, getting rid of stuff, they were able to do that.
Yeah, and it sort of undoes some of the sins of the past where we get obsessed with technology and we forget, don't we? So this really is realigning everything back to what we're here to try and achieve, what our outcomes, why are we doing this, rather than we have technology for technology's sake. Splendid. So those are great 6 steps for being the Martech Grinch this Christmas. And the final thing in our agenda is what song are we going to go with, Jeff?
Well, I think something that fits with the theme, because I'm trying to think about the positive aspect of this. We've got our future, has been foretold, and so we now need to take steps about building to a better future. So I picked "Don't Stop," and it's "Don't Stop Thinking About Tomorrow" by Fleetwood Mac in 1977. One other reason I picked this is because last week Christine McVie, the composer of that song, passed away recently, and as she says, "Open your eyes and look at the day. You'll see things in a different way."
Splendid.
And that applies to your tech stack too.
Yeah, I love that. And yes, and I think it's good that we're doing this in honor of Christine McVie. And we're approaching the end of the 70s, so you never know. All right, mate. And more importantly than anything else, will I be admitted to the Rockstar CMO studio next week?
Absolutely. Your VIP pass is ready at the door.
All right, I'll see you next week, mate. Thank you, Jeff. And that was Don't Stop Thinking About Tomorrow by Fleetwood Mac from 1977. What are your predictions for 2023? Let us know. You can find us at Rockstar CMO on LinkedIn or contact us through our website at rockstarcmo.com. Right. It's time for me to go backstage with returning guest Grant Johnson for his third appearance. Grant is a serial CMO, currently the CMO at Embers. He's held the top marketing job in a string of B2B companies, including Kofax, Becker Systems, SDL and Cylance, and is now sharing this experience as a mentor at cmomentor.com. And this week, we dip into his blog as he shares his 12 pitfalls of being a CMO. Welcome back, Grant, to Rockstar CMO FM. How are you?
I'm doing great, Ian. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. It's good to speak to you again. And of course, for regular listeners, you'll know that, Grant, you've been on the show for episode 135 and before that, episode 44. So hopefully people know a little bit about you already. But just for those that haven't listened before, what do you do?
I'm a 4-time CMO. I'm currently CMO in Burst. We're a spend management company. We help manage all things involved with travel, expense, invoice automation, and payments, which is a lot of fun. And I did start the CMO Mentor project a couple months back to try to share, hopefully, a few of the lessons learned and landmines to avoid.
Yeah. No, it's a really good read. So I'll put it in the show notes, but people have a look up CMO Mentor. Grant's sharing some great thoughts there. And like I say, last time you talked about, or did I say last time you talked about the 5 C's of being a CMO, very positive about, being a CMO. But as it's Christmas, and I guess it's a little bit of the Grinch, you've also been writing about the pitfalls of being a CMO. And I know you've put together 12 of those. And as it's sort of like the 12 days of Christmas for the holidays, shall we crack through some of those? What are your 12 things that you think are pitfalls of being a CMO?
Yeah, that sounds great. Let me just go through these one by one. In fact, one of those 12, I did a couple blogs on this. You contributed, so I'm going to have you actually do that one. Somewhere around the middle of this, the mic back over to you, Ian. But
I'll have to remember which one it was.
Oh my God, it's like 7 or 8. We'll get there. But let's build a little. You can read ahead. But the first one is I like to say when you're trying to become a CMO and that's you're aspiring to it, in the first. Mm-hmm. Somebody offers you that job, you say, like, great, I finally made it to my goal, head of marketing, CMO, whatever that pinnacle is you're trying to reach. But I think you've got to determine, is this me? And just because the market, the money, is compelling and the position and all that comes with it sounds good. I found that the determining factor of success and happiness is really the management team, the culture, and having shared values. Like the opportunity would be great, and you're dealing with a bunch of jerks, and people are undermining you and throwing marketing under the bus. It's like, who wants that, right? There's dumpster fires out there. Avoid it. So, will the good times come and go, and the going gets tough? Is this a leadership team that you think will hold together, support each other? And look, we've been through COVID, that's really a lot of companies. You could see how the management team either, frayed or fractured or, solidified. So that would be the first one.
Right. And the thing, sorry, Nate, to interrupt, but for all of these, I want to ask, how do you figure this out when you're going through the process? But I guess if we did that for all 12, we'd run out of time. But I am interested in all of these 12, like how. It'd be interesting doing a follow-up is how is it as a prospective CMO, as a marketing leader, how do you figure this out during the interview process? I mean, this one is so pivotal, isn't it?
Yeah, maybe the other one I can share the interview questions I ask.
Yeah.
And look at the ones that I get asked. And that's, I triangulate it. And does this add in, or is there somebody, is there a red herring in there? So we can come back to that one. The second one is there clarity over the scope of your role? There's, I think we all know, anybody who's a student of marketing knows Seth Godin, pretty famous. And he said, the CMO, as much as, you want to be dynamic, you're a change agent, you really shouldn't be the chief hype officer, and not have the commensurate responsibilities of what you're going to be held accountable for. Some heads of marketing I've seen, specs or talk to peers where like they don't have comms, like there's a separate head of comms. Like that doesn't make sense to me. Or like the website, which, is a key part of prospect and customer experience, hasn't reported to them. And so you've got to make sure that your remit and your resources are aligned so you have a chance to succeed. And that includes, what's the magnitude of the change that I'm expecting to accomplish, what budget, what resource, people, and, financial resource do I have to succeed? And is this doable? Like, let's say I've come in a situation where, marketing was contributing, and this is key on all the minds of CMOs, 30% of the pipeline. And the CEO says, well, you need to double that with the same budget. Well,
yeah.
I can work miracles, but I don't walk on water. So that clarity is key.
Right.
And the second one, and this actually starts before you say yes to a job. I have to give John Ellett, who wrote the CMO manifesto, credit for this one, is setting expectations. Mm-hmm. And before you even say yes, which is to know what I'd like to ask the question. Okay, here's a sneak peek for the next time. Is a year goes by, how do you describe what I've accomplished?
Yeah.
Like, what have I done? What impact have I made? What's changed? What's gotten better? What have we stopped doing that made no sense before? And then, you really can calibrate and understand, like, okay, these are the outcomes that I know I can deliver. I want to deliver. I get excited by, or, I'm not so sure I want to go do that. Right. So I think that's 3.
Yeah. What's your 4th?
And 4 is out of alignment. And what's the key? I like out of alignment as CMO pitfall because, having done this a few times, you can say, oh, great, we're aligned, we're locked arms. It's the go-to-market team, sales, marketing, channels, partners, whatever. And what happens is which makes technology marketing exciting. We're in very dynamic markets, market shifts, economic shifts, competitive shifts, new entrants. And so therefore priorities shift. And not every company has the, resolute discipline of adhering to the plan. Like, okay, now we have a new priority. Yeah. And next thing you know, you're out of alignment. Like, you were let's say I'm mentoring in my CMO mentorship, in addition to my full-time job, I mentor a couple, what I call early tenure CMOs. And one of them was saying, hey, I met with the board. They said, you need to focus all your resources on SMB. So I started doing that. A quarter later, a new CRO comes in and says, hey, we got to knock down enterprise. We need fewer deals. And they said, the board says, what the hell are you doing? I said, well, somebody moved the cheese, right? So she had quite a shift, and she'd created all this motion, marketing, driving SMB, and now she needed to shift to enterprise, which, by the way, takes longer. And so you've got to make sure you get the feedback, stay in alignment, keep confirming, hey, this is what we want to do. And so I think that's 4.
Yeah. And that, I'm sorry, just to interrupt that. I mean, that one there isn't just an interview question, is it? That is how do we keep the business in line? How do we as the marketing leaders stay in touch with these changing needs, right? And try and guide people in the fact that they have to commit to some of these things, right?
Yeah, and you have to say no. I mean, look, sales is famous. Yeah. And how about this and how about that? And, even CEO or others, everybody has ideas. Like if you're in finance, somebody that says, well, why don't you change the numbers? Well, they are marketing. Everybody's got an opinion. Hey, do this. I'll often say, hey, it's a great idea. And, we're really busy executing, heads down on the plan. And I think we can try that next quarter. Right. You can't be interrupt driven. You got to be focused. So The next one is what I call not nurturing C-suite partnerships. And this is one of my sort of lessons learned. Like, hey, I knew I needed to align with the CRO, but I learned after the first time I got to also really align with the CTO, the head of customer success, which is often a really key element in the cross-sell customer-based marketing. And the CFO, like, when times are tough and the CFO, you don't have a good relationship, says, well, let's cut marketing. That's a variable expense. Well, there's a consequence of cutting any expense. And in the case of, the responsibility to build pipeline, if you just cut the budget, if you go from 4 million to 3 million, you probably going to cut your pipeline creation by a third. Maybe you can get 10% more efficient, but as we said earlier, you're not going to get 50% more efficient overnight.
No, absolutely. Yeah.
So I think, you want to speak in the language of the CHRO or the chief people officer, the CFO, make sure you're a partner to both, and you help them, achieve their goals that, like, HR wants to help, engage, recruit and retain. So help them do that. I mean, brand marketing can help with that, and communications, of course. And then with the CFO, get the metrics that give them the visibility and confidence. Like, I can go to our current CFO and say, look, I can tell you with certainty based on this historical performance of the last 12 months, if we invest 500,000 more, we'll generate 2 million more for this particular product line. and they'll say, okay, great. Now, they may not say here's 500,000, but at least you've created that credibility.
Yeah. And I also like your point about the chief people officer or chief HR officer, because I think that's often forgotten, isn't it? As like a big part of our role as a CMO is to retain, attract, and inspire great people with our brand, with what we're doing from a marketing perspective. And we play a big role in that, don't we? It's often overlooked in our pressure to create demand, right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And look, with the disruption of COVID, and most places are remote first or hybrid, that it's hard to maintain these relationships, because you're not, meeting in the office or for a pint after work, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Next one, number 6 is CEO, and it can be really intimidating if you're working there's no weak CEOs that are timid, I should say. They may be relatively stronger or not, but get to know them on a personal level. I think I've done a really good job of that over the last 3 years here with our CEO, and I think it pays dividend. You have to invest the time. I will tell you, one of my stops as a CMO, I found out that the CEO liked to get bagels on Saturdays, and just because it's something he liked to do, and so I could have, hey, let me join you one day, right? And I found out one of my peers came in and he said, oh yeah, I was just having, bagels with the CEO. I was like, gosh, I should have probably done that, because when tough times, I'm not to say you have to break bread or drink, wine with them. That doesn't hurt either. But I think that is really going to help you, and you can keep in touch. And also just request feedback. You have to be able to know where you're not succeeding. The worst thing that can happen is I remember asking the CEO, how do you manage? He says, well, if you're doing a good job, you get lots of rope. If you're not, I'm going to be inside your shorts, so you don't. And so you want to say, hey, are we still on track? We down, and one of my CEOs, I could see he would look at his notes and he'd go, how are we doing on these things? He would like to track, so I'd say, I'd be ready for that list. Is that still on the list? Okay, we can check that one off your list. Okay, cool. Now what are we tracking? So I think that's awesome.
It's also human nature for anybody, even powerful people, to not want to give bad news, isn't it? So you have to create that sort of safe conversation environment where you get that feedback, which is essential, that you both trust each other, that feedback can be given, right?
Well, yeah, and that relates to, that's why I did this one after the C-suite. You ask the CFO, the CEO, how are we doing? How's my team doing? Yeah. What can we do better, different? And, and then what I call is the board meeting missings. And again, this is just a lesson learned, is I didn't know this my first time as a CMO. I relied on the CEO. I went to a board meeting. One of the new board members, who shall remain nameless, undermined, shot down an idea that the CEO loved. And I thought, well, gosh, you're the founder, the CEO. Why didn't you support it? It's well, you're on your own here. And so what I learned was, if I've got a change initiative, something that's any sort of, strategic endeavor or risk to the business, talk to one, ideally 2 board members, and say, hey, Mary or Larry, can I run this by you? What do you think? And how do you think this will go at the board meeting? And that way, they can chime in and say, hey, this is a pretty good idea. They don't have to say, hey, we discussed it before, and they generally don't, right? But it kind of gives you, they can coach you on, I remember I had an idea at one of my stints, and the board member gave really good advice. That's not really a strategic thing. Do it. You just go do it. The board doesn't want to talk about, but this other idea you have, let's bring that one up. So you just, it helps you succeed at board meetings. These are often, very high intensity, microscopic analyses of your plans of performance. So, bring some allies.
And it's a difficult call, isn't it? Because you think that the board are going to be interested in these high level strategic things, but sometimes they're really interested in some of the detail and will be impressed with you in having that conversation. But unless you have those pre-meetings, you don't really know, do you? And so you could be talking over their heads about strategic stuff, thinking that's what the board are interested in, and they want to dive into the details sometimes. And sometimes they shouldn't, but they do, right? And like you say, you don't want that. You don't want to fuck up in a meeting like that.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. So I'm going to give you a little preview. You're number 9. Number 8. Number 8, the honeymoon is over. I love this one because the cold reality is the average tenure for CMO is somewhere between 2 to 3 years. I'm pretty happy. I've done more than 3 years at 3 places, so I must be doing something. I'm not sure yet. But the thing is, you all get a 1-year honeymoon. It seems that like I made a hire, unless you totally screw up, you got to have a great first year. But what happens is, I was at one of my CMO stints, and I was sitting down with my annual review. The CEO said, unbelievable first year, great job. Your second year wasn't so good. I thought, geez, I didn't feel good. But he was right. I looked at what I did the first year, because I came in with a whirlwind and changed plans. I wouldn't say I was on cruise control. I wasn't pushing as hard. So I said, I redoubled, took the feedback, said, look, what can I do to make year 3 as big an impact or bigger than year 1? And so, it was really good advice. And I've heard Nick Mehta, I don't know if you follow him at all, from Gainside. He said, hey, CEO, fire yourself every year. What he meant by that is, just because you've done what you've done doesn't mean that'll get you to the next stage you want to go. So I just think having that, hey, it's a new year, whether you're on a fiscal year or a calendar year, or they align, to think like, what can we do to improve? I'm always telling my team, we want to have more measurable impact. It's not effort, it's impact.
Yeah. And there's a common thread here, isn't it, of communication, isn't it? And getting that feedback. I mean, to know that you didn't quite hit the mark in the second year, and the perception that was come across. I mean, that it sounds like that was a positive conversation. You could bring change, but sometimes that conversation doesn't happen, and you don't get the opportunity to bring change, right? So that's
you get asked to take time off. That happens. That's the risk. I always if you go to the top, understand it's the high reward and high risk. They go hand in hand. So I'm going to turn over this next one to you.
All right. So number 9, and just to give you a little background to the listeners, is, Grant, you actually went out and asked a bunch of people for their pitfalls, right? And I was, you were very nice in using one of the things I contributed. So the thing I contributed really was that we need to balance our desire for doing the right thing from a pure marketing perspective with the needs and wants of the business, right? So my example of this is, we naturally want to be bold. We want to differentiate our brands. We want to stand out in the market. But that's sometimes seen as risky for some other members of the management team or the board, and you need to take them along that path. So you can't just be standing out front with a big flag going, we're on top of this hill. You need to bring people with you. And you may feel as a marketer that's not bold enough, or that's not moving fast enough. But if you don't do that, there's like a little piece of elastic that you're stretching out. And once that pings, that's it for you. They're going to want to work with somebody that's right with you. So it really is it's the advice you've already given is being hooked into the C-suite and the board and what they need, and just going far enough that you're pushing with your marketing, what you want to do as a marketer, but if you've got that strength of the board. So that was my contribution, and thank you very much for using it.
I love that. I mean, because, it's like the adage of like, you want followership. That's what leadership people want to follow you. If they're not with you and you're doing this thing, they want you to do that thing, then it doesn't matter how good it is, it's not going to be appreciated. So that's, like you say, you've got to always calibrate on that. And
you've got to be really in tune with the different voices and the different sort of how different people feel on the board. Because it might be you've got one champion. I've had that, where I've had one champion and it's gone and gone and gone. But then you realize the rest of the board aren't with either of you. And both of you, what I mean? Like it does, and you still get, it still goes badly for both of you. So
let's go off this cliff together. All right, so number 2, right? Unless it's in the water, it may be okay, but if you're landing on dirt, not so fun. Overhire your strengths. I have to credit John Miller, CMO of Demand Base, former co-founder of Marketo, great guy. Wow. Marketing is a complex function, right? You've got demand gen, corporate marketing, product marketing, brand marketing, ops. And every CMO, generally comes with a function. They've got a major in one or more and a minor in the others, right? And a common pitfall is like, you hire people like you. They think like you, and so forth. And but they don't complement you as well as they could, right? And so you need to actually hire people that are really strong in areas that you're not as strong. Like, for example, I brought in a person at the company who really just loved get into the MarTech stack. Like, I can do the MarTech stack and I understand it, but I don't stay up nights. How do we become Marketo certified level 4 and website certified level 5? It's like, I'm glad somebody's worrying about all the operational integration improvements, because while I could do it, it's not and I understand what needs to be done. you've got to have somebody who not only has that, but, shares my view, at least, on continuous improvement. You're sort of never there, right? You're at a place that's good enough, and then how do you get better? Yeah. The last two, and not necessarily particular order of importance, but this one could almost make this number one. So I've heard from so many CMOs, CMO huddles and otherwise. I got this from Kevin Doohan, who I've known through the CMO groups. Market your marketing, right? And you may be doing great work. Sales may like it. Customers, prospects like it. Some other groups like it. But, people just, the C-suite isn't aware of it. While it's clear to see that sales made the number, didn't. Marketing's contribution, even if you're creating pipeline and, signing up customers for your annual event or getting more testimonials and other sort of artifacts of impact, you've got to, it doesn't mean you need a monthly newsletter, but you certainly need to be communicating, here's what we've done, here's the difference it's made before, after, picture painting, storytelling, and educating the influencers on what do we do in marketing, what is the tangible impact, what were our goals, what do we achieve, and that way you can make them allies instead of critics. You still made somebody say, I wouldn't have done that ad or that campaign, but in general they'll be more supportive. And then last, number 12 for our Grinch special here is maybe why you chose marketing in the first place. I mean, anytime you start a new job, we talked about you're humming, you're pumped, you're excited, and then you get interrupt driven, and you have deadlines and deliverables and setbacks. But the reason I chose marketing is the same reason I'd choose it if I had to make the decision as a college graduate today. I call it's one of the few fields that's a full brain function. It requires to be really good, especially I think B2C and B2B, you've got to have both right brain, the visual intuitive, the brand, the sense of brand character sensibilities, communication nuances, and you've got to have left brain. You've got to be analytical. It's an art and a science. And so you've got to be at once precise, grasp complex ideas, numbers at a high level of abstraction, but also command, technical ideas and know what good is. Like I'll often say, hey, that's good, but we could do better. Well, what do you mean? I think it's good enough. Well, actually, it's not good enough. And then we get to better. So, oh, yeah, I'm glad you pushed us on that. It is better. And so if you feel like, hey, I just want to be, left brain or right brain, you can still succeed in marketing. But that's what, to me, is sustaining, is like it's always challenging, and it uses your whole brain.
Yeah, no, that's good. And I also think, it's so intuitive. It's so great always talking to you, Grant. But then I'm thinking, I wish I'd chosen marketing earlier in my career, because it's absolutely that. As you say, you can combine that creativeness with that analytics and stuff. So that's perfect. So those are the 12 pitfalls of being a CMO for the holidays. Thank you very much for your time, Grant. I know you're incredibly busy, and we absolutely shot through those. So I look forward to getting you back on the show, maybe talking about some of these things and perhaps how we might avoid some of these pitfalls when we're being interviewed and stuff. So that's
that's great. Yeah, we kept to our time target, it looks like, and always great to talk to Ian. Listen, if we don't talk before the new year, happy holidays and prosperous new year. Thank you. Look forward to being a continued listener on Rockstar.
Thank you, Grant. And just one last thing for listeners. When they spin the dial on the interwebs, where they're going to find you, mate?
Yeah, I made it easy. Grant E. Johnson 1. So I'm Grant E. Johnson 1 at Gmail, Grant E. Johnson 1 on Twitter, Grant E. Johnson 1 on LinkedIn. I don't know who 2 is, but you can send them. I'm still 1.
Well, they're all number 2 to me, mate. You're always going to be number 1, Grant Johnson. Thank you, mate, and I'll speak to you very soon. And enjoy the holidays yourself. Bye-bye. Splendid. Thank you, Grant. Love catching up with my old boss. I'll include a link to his website, cmomentor.com, in the show notes. Right, it's time to wind down the week in the Rockstar CMO virtual bar and be transported away for a cocktail and a marketing thought with my friend and content marketing guru, Robert Rose. Good evening, Robert. What are you drinking?
Oh, what have you done with this bar?
I forgot it was that week.
What is going on in here? It seems you've brought in an entire 120-piece orchestra, and It sounds like they're all tuning up. They're all tuning up, getting ready for. It's just so loud in here. And normally this bar is small, but boy, you've got 120 people in here, all with violins and tuxedos and tuning up for some. Are you having a concert here?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, surely you remember that every year we have a Christmas concert.
Ah, indeed.
Yes, I was all ready and prepared. I knew exactly what was going on in the bar today.
I see. Well, luckily we have a cocktail that could feed all 120 of these folks. I mean, that's good. It's a very easy one this week. Yes, to continue our sort of autumn theme or fall theme, as it were, as we get prepared for the Christmas holiday and the advent of winter and all of those things. Well, we have this is also continuing from last week when we talked about having ginger beer or ginger ale.
Yes.
And I've, of course, the only time I drink ginger ale or ginger beer is this time of year. Mm-hmm. And I love it. And so for the second week in a row, we're going to do a little bit of a ginger beer cocktail. And so this is called a pomegranate ginger beer cocktail. Oh. And so this brings in the California, if you will, of to the whole situation. And so and pomegranates are in season right now, so it's a lovely time to actually do that. And so it's basically if you find your ginger ale, of course, but then what you want is pomegranate juice or liqueur if you can find it, but pomegranate juice is all you really need. And again, you can pretty much find that in most places these days. It's relatively popular. Then you want a little bit of dry vermouth, probably 4 ounces in your sort of couple of serving 2 or something like that. If we're doing 2, and then a little bit of orange bitters, and then of course the ginger beer to top, all of that. And then a little orange peel for garnish. And so the vermouth is really our liquor, unless you go with a pomegranate liqueur, or play around. You can play around with this and add in other liqueurs if you like that. More citrusy or those kinds of liqueurs will be better in this. And it's just a lovely, wonderful. It's very refreshing, I have to say, for a California fall.
It sounds delicious. But would you think gin would work in it in any way?
It will have to, won't it?
Well, I'll attempt to make that very drink with only the ingredients from my desktop bar. And so I am going to start off... Actually, dry vermouth. I do have some dry vermouth, but I don't have it on my bar at the moment. So I'm going to start off with some... Oh, ice. Did you put any ice in yours? Did you put ice in yours?
Yes, there is ice in this drink for sure. This is on the rocks, yeah.
Oh, it's on the rocks. Good. So I've put some ice in there. I've put some, rocks in there. I've put some of my lovely Hendrick's gin in there. And then pomegranate juice and ginger beer. Well, I mean, it just goes without saying. That's obviously very, very similar to cucumber tonic water, right?
And that's right. That's right. That is really just not anything that's in this drink. But it sounds really lovely.
The cucumber is the most English of pomegranates as well.
Indeed.
You know, sir. Let me try this. That is delicious. Very nice. I could drink one of these every week. And what are we calling this?
We're just going to call this the pomegranate ginger beer cocktail. It is just exactly what's in it. There's nothing cute about the titling here.
No, it's quite unimaginative, actually, the name of this, Robert, for you.
Yeah, well, indeed. I'm, give me 4 or 5 of these and I might
think of something. Where are we drinking these?
We're going to come to California for this because it is California fall here, which means that it is spectacular weather. This is the best time to come to California, which is late fall, early winter. And it is just a beautiful time here. So we're going to head up to the mountains into a place called Big Bear. Big Bear is about an hour and a half away from Los Angeles, depending on whether there's snow on the ground or not. So you climb up the mountain, you get into Big Bear, and there's cabins and trees, and there's a beautiful lake called Lake Arrowhead, and some pretty good restaurants. It's mostly comfort food. It's not great restaurants, but there's a great bar in Big Bear, and you feel like you're in a little bit of a Southern California, but ski resort sort of combination. And it's a great place for us to sip these things and look out over the mountains and hang out.
That's that's one of the amazing things about where you live, isn't it? And you're an hour and a half away from going skiing, and it's probably
you can actually do it. Yeah, the big urban legend is that you can do breakfast on the mountains, lunch at the beach, or I should say, breakfast on the mountain, lunch in the desert, and then dinner at the beach.
Wow.
And you can do that, and I have done it. You can. It's not a pleasant day, I will tell you that, because it's a lot of driving. But you can actually do it, and I have done it.
Oh, that sounds fabulous. Well, anyway, so we're up in the cabins in Big Bear, and conversation is exhausted and it turns to marketing. What are we going to talk about this week, Robert?
We're going to talk about something that has come up in the last couple of weeks as I've been working with clients here, and it's fascinating. And I've sort of been toying with the sort of big idea question here, but basically it's where does content go where does it fit in the business? And what I mean by that is that inevitably, when we start talking with a client about governance and operations of content, that it's really difficult to not talk about the entire governance and operations of the company. Because what you quickly discover is that content is in everything. Right. And it's really hard to separate those things. Let me give you an example. You've got a business, and you've got a technology team, and you've got a marketing team, and you've got an HR team, and you've got a legal team, and you've got a sales team. You got all these teams that are relatively siloed, but let's assume that it's functional business and they communicate well with one another. And in that, somebody says, you know what, we need a chatbot on our customer experience. And somebody goes, great, that's a wonderful idea. A chatbot would be a great way to create a better customer experience on our website, and we can link to it on social. So it crosses a lot of different, different functions in the business. There's legal involved, sales to some extent maybe get involved. Technology will absolutely be involved. And then you go, great, is a chatbot a technology project that has content associated with it, or is it a content project with technology associated with it? And either is right. Either of those things is right, because at the heart of a chatbot is the great content that you're going to fill it with to learn how to respond to queries. Same thing with replatforming the website, right? We're going to replatform the website with a content management system. Is that an IT project that has content involved, or is it a content project that has technology and IT involved? And either, again, is the right answer. Branding, doing a rebrand and remessaging. Is that a content with brand involved, or is that brand with content involved? All so on and so forth. What we're finding is that these companies are finding it difficult to figure out where's the common input, right? Where's it's a chicken and egg, a little bit of a kind of a thing, because content fits into everything we're going to do from big initiatives, right? And so when we start talking about things like, let's form an editorial board for the day-to-day management of, how to create thought leadership and big content projects and all those kinds of things. It's like, fantastic. Well, that editorial board suddenly goes, well, shouldn't they be the one to review the chatbot project or look at the rebranding or look at the replatforming? It's like, maybe not. Maybe it doesn't hit their desk until somebody else is going to be managing that, right? It's the technology group or the branding group or whoever's going to be managing that big thing. And they're just brought in as, in the traditional sort of racy idea, consulted on that project. And it's really hard to segment that. And what we're learning, by the way, out of all of this, because it is a thorny problem, but what we're learning is that the decision about those things is less important than making one. In other words, it's really just the conscious acknowledgement by the group of what these things are, putting definitions to these terms, putting definitions to these ideas, that is the important part. It's not necessarily a best practice to do one way or the other. In other words, it's just important to say what the chatbot project is. Is it a technology project with content or a content project with technology? It's just the importance is making a decision, not what decision you make.
Right. And the importance there is is that because of because you started off talking about governance? Is it important to have that defined because of the ownership and governance and maybe the racing model and all that kind of stuff?
Well, it's because the way that content is, and this is specific to content, is that in other projects. So if it's a content project, what's the first thing we think about? Content, right? What's the content going to be, right? What's the experience going to be for the person that's going to be going through this experience? And that, by the way, is whether it's an intranet, whether it's a website, whether it's a chatbot, whether it's a CMS system, whether it's documentation and technical documentation. It's, what is the experience going to be? And so we think about content. That's arguably a great place to start all kinds of projects like this. But that is often not where things get started if it's going to be a technology project or a marketing or a branding or this kind of thing, right? They start with the requirements of the business and the functionality, and they design it that way. And content is usually, and here's the rub, the last thing that's thought about. And so by the time that it hits the radar of the people who are responsible for putting content in, one, they've had no input into what's going to get done. So therefore they're fitting into templates or fitting into content areas, suboptimal ways of creating content. The classic of this is when CMS templates get done. And so you start creating this sort of weird hierarchy of, what I call content about the content, right? Where, you sort of have to, because you have to fill all the wells of the content of a web page. If you just want to make one little addition that doesn't fit, you have to make a whole new web page. So you either have to duplicate all that other content and basically, so it doesn't look stupid, or make up stuff, right? And so that, because it hasn't been considered, it's often the last thing considered. So the question is always, where does it come in? And the content teams will often say, please, as early as possible. But that's the importance of making that decision so that where content's going to be brought into that project, and it can be brought in at the appropriate part.
But I think also, if you're thinking about a content strategy and a content distribution and all that kind of stuff and what your content's going to be used for, these little silo thinkings, it just made me chuckle. We said, we need a chatbot. So many of these projects are only going to be successful if they have great content behind them. But as you say, the content isn't the thing that's first considered. So in order for a chatbot to be any good, it requires content, right? It requires you to have a good understanding of what questions might be asked, what a good insight into the customer, all these sorts of things that a good marketing team or a good content marketing team should already know. So that they should be absolutely there in the meeting day one when somebody says, shall we create a chatbot? And I completely agree with you on that.
Yeah, it's why content strategy is such an important function, right? Because because when we think of content, the knee-jerk reaction is to think, it's marketing, it's communications, it's PR, it's all the promotional stuff that we're talking and putting in front of people. But and in fact, it is much broader than that, right? It is much, arguably, the content strategy should extend into things like, how are new invoices getting designed? What's the new template or look and feel of the contracts that are getting put in front of new vendors? It should extend to all of those things, because all of those are ultimately communication vehicles with how we, present ourselves to different audiences. In this case, sometimes vendors, sometimes analysts, sometimes journalists, other audiences other than customers. So you would hope that brand, that experience that we put so much pride into, extends into that. And this is top of mind for me because I've been very lucky we're working with a number of new clients right now. So I've been going through myriad procurement systems and legal contracting and onboarding documents for vendors. And I will tell you, it's awful. It's for most of them. And these are companies that have great brands and great experiences for customers, but the procurement / onboarding / legal experience is just absolutely horrific. And it's because content is the last thing considered.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, or brand. I mean, or brand voice, or all of that good stuff. I mean, when you were talking just there, I'm thinking about, because I'm involved in some branding projects, and I'm thinking about the same way about brand, is that brand, it's like almost your whole company strategy needs to be focused around brand and content,
right.
because it's the promise that you're making. And I agree with you, even when it comes down to these kind of more transactional things, that your brand voice and your content strategy should be touching on those things so that there's that consistency of experience, right?
Right. And, that's for many companies, of size, that's an overwhelming proposition, right? Oh my God, you're talking about everything we do. And in some cases, right, I've had this conversation, right? I had it recently with a CFO at an event who was like, you keep talking about content. And he said, that's everything. That's every communication we make with a customer. And I'm like, and I just let it hang there. I'm like, it's kind of an awkward silence, but do you understand now that it's important? And the answer to that is yes, I do, but it's overwhelming the amount of, I can't even conceive of how we would change everything we do from a communication vehicle and container of those communications as one strategy. And I'm like, right, you're right. You're not wrong there. That doesn't mean we shouldn't try.
No, absolutely. And oh my God, this one I think we could do almost a whole show on, because it comes into the culture and enablement, doesn't it, of your team. It's like you want people to then naturally think like that. So even if they are the guy that's drafting the contract they're going to send to you as a vendor, that they're thinking about themselves as a representative of the brand, both in terms of voice and the way it looks and the quality and all that good stuff, right?
That's where it starts,
Yeah, all of our teams are brand stewards, aren't we? So
it starts. That's exactly right. It starts with common standards and ways of working. Which you would think things like legal and accounting would be similarly overwhelming, but big businesses have been able to make that work. Yeah. And so the same can be true for content. We can create those enterprise-wide standards and guidelines, and have real ramifications if those things aren't adhered to. And technology certainly enables us to scale that a lot better than we certainly used to. But there's a consciousness, a willingness that has to happen, and this is where I get to my point about the decision is more important than what the decision is. There has to be a consciousness that this is important enough to make a decision on, because most of the time it's not. Most of the time it's just sort of like, I don't know, we just do it. We just it's a big project. It's going to be unwieldy. We're only going to do it once every 5 or 10 years. So why do we need a template or a definition of that if it's something we only do once every 10 years? Well, no, we need for all, you do this project once every 10 years, but you do a project like it probably once every 6 months. And so having a definition of that kind of idea, that process is what is important, especially in today's world with multi-channel and digital and so many different ways of expressing ourselves.
And so easy to accidentally create a silo, just human nature. I love that. So your question was, where does the content go? It sounds like it goes everywhere. I love that.
Yes, that's right. And I mean, basically, somebody said to me the other day, they said, where should the content strategy team report into? And I said, yes. And they meant, what do you mean by yes? And I mean, it should report into somewhere. I don't care. It doesn't really matter as long as it's an acknowledged function in the business. Absolutely. And it has the requisite power and responsibilities and other abilities to do what it needs to do. It doesn't matter where it reports into, as long as the business consciously acknowledges that it should and could and would and will exist.
And is enabled. Yeah, absolutely. So if people are looking for where your content goes, where are they going to look?
Oh, I don't know, dude. I just, whatever, Google, I guess. I don't know. We have a little website called contentadvisory.net that we do some things on occasionally, on every now and again. Yeah.
And you are, and also you regularly write for Content Marketing Institute. You do a good.
That's true. Content Marketing Institute is where you'll
great.
find me on a weekly basis for sure.
And when people spin the dial on the interwebs, where are they going to find you?
They're going to find me a lot on LinkedIn these days, and also Mastodon. I am at robert@experienceadvisors.io. And by the way, if you're experimenting with Mastodon and you want a sort of a server that is fun, marketing centric, and just sort of easy to get into, come on over to experienceadvisors.io. We're taking folks on. We created a little server over there for Mastodon, and we're having a good time.
Love it. Absolutely. Yeah, I'm there too. All right, mate. And most importantly for me, are you going to be in the bar next week?
Oh, indeed.
I look forward to it, man. I'll see you then. Thank you, Robert. Great points there, as usual. You may have noticed that all my interviews went slightly long this week, so thank you for indulging us as we covered quite a lot of ground. So, that's a wrap on episode 144 of the Rockstar CMO effing marketing podcast. Thanks to Jeff, Grant and Robert for sharing their insight, but most of all, thank you for dropping a dime into your podcasting jukebox, selecting our track and jiving along with us. What do you think? Does the world need another effing marketing podcast? How about letting us know with a rating or review in your favourite podcast app, or just keep listening. I'm glad you're here. Next week, Jeff will be back. Todd Irwin, Chief Strategy Officer of creative agency Phaser, makes his second appearance. And Robert will be back in our virtual bar. Until then, have a great week. And I hope you again join us next week on Rockstar CMO FM.
This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.